Okay. Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. You know what Sunday means? It is the Sunday shift with Nurse Cheung. It's not an education night, it's just us sitting down having a chat kind of night, talking about all things pre nursing, nursing school, graduate nursing, senior nursing, all of that stuff that you maybe are concerned about. Maybe you're anxious about what the next steps are. You're worried about how am I going to move forward in my career, things like that. So, this is really just an informal way of us sitting down, seeing each other, having a conversation, answering those difficult questions with full transparency, of course, and just hopefully making you feel a little less anxious and a little bit more confident when it comes to healthcare in general. So I know that there's been a lot going on these last couple weeks, especially. It's been a little insane, to say the least. If you've been watching the news about a lot of nursing and healthcare things, so if you have any questions about that, I will try my best to answer those also to the best of my ability as well. So hello, hi Noi. Hi, Joa. Hi, Justine. Hello. Hello. It's a little boo boo. I promise he's not scary. He's cute. Hi, Demanda. Hello. Hello. Haley says, I take my TEAS test on Wednesday. That's exciting, Haley. I'm so excited for you. You've got this. Deep breaths. Make sure you go in there. I would, the way that I did is I didn't study the night before. I found that if I studied the night before, I tend to overwhelm my brain and then I start second guessing myself the next day. So do just a little bit of light studying on Tuesday. Don't overwhelm yourself. Know that you've got this. You've put in the time and you're going to do just fine. How long do you think a new grad should work before thinking on going back to school? Ooh, good question. So it really depends. If you are planning to go back to school for maybe high level acuity type of positions, like maybe being like a CRNA, somewhere along those lines, I would say give yourself at least a good couple years, minimally at least 2 years. If you're planning on going back to do maybe like nurse practitioner, nurse manager, nursing education, things like that, then I wouldn't worry so much about an extended period of time like the 2 years. I'd say give yourself at least a year. Get your feet wet until the point that you feel comfortable and then go back. That would be my biggest recommendation. I passed my TEAS. Now I'm ready to get into the field tomorrow. Thank you so much. I've been waiting for your help. The PN, I heard it's hard, but I'm scared. No, don't be scared. Here's the deal. Nursing school is very difficult if we're being completely transparent, right? When you think about it, whether it's PN, RN, it doesn't matter like which side of the coin it is that you're going to. Nursing school can be very scary. But the thing is that even with all the chaos, nursing school is still fun too. There's going to be a lot of concepts that you're going to learn. There's going to be a lot of simulations that are really cool that you're going to be a part of. You're going to go into clinicals, right? Clinicals, you're going to have a big amount of time to talk to patients, see what they're there for, how we treat them, how we to take care of them. I mean, there's a lot of really good pieces. Yes, there's crappy pieces too. The studying, the endless nights of being awake, the massive amount of assignments and things like that. Like I completely and 100% understand that. But just know that nursing school, while it does seem scary, it was actually one of the funnest things that I did. I wouldn't do it again if I had the opportunity, but I do look back on it fondly now that I've been a nurse for a little while. It does help tremendously having gone through the process. So deep breaths, enjoy the chaos while you have it. I am new to nursing, studying my bachelor's degree in nursing. Do you think online class nursing is hard to find a job? Great question. So here's the deal. It depends on who accredited your online class. So a lot of times with online courses, if you're doing your BSN and you didn't do your associates before that, most likely, not always, but most likely those particular programs, you're going to be in a situation where you may not have a nationally accredited school, meaning that the school was probably regionally accredited based on the area that they're at. So I think that's what makes it really difficult sometimes, is because when you go to a regionally accredited school, it becomes really difficult for you to find, if you decide to further your education later on in life, it becomes a little bit more difficult because a lot of schools look at national or regional accreditation very differently. I don't think that you'll necessarily have any issues finding a job. There are some hospitals that have like very high prestigious certifications, like Magnet. There's a lot of like different centers for traumas, for strokes, for cardiovascular. Like those areas may weigh national accredited schools more heavily, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily won't be able to find a position. Rosaline, in 2 weeks, I start my last term on the nursing school and will finish in December. Thanks for your help. I passed my TEAS 2 years ago. Huge congrats to you. That's amazing. You're almost done. You're seeing the light at the end of that tunnel. You got that little bit of light. You're going to do your practicum. Practicum is going to be chaos. Getting your last assignments in will be chaos. And then you'll get your ATT, your ticket to test to go take your NCLEX, and then you'll pass and you'll be done. And you'll finally reach that point that took you 2 or 4 years to get there. So I see a couple people in the chat that were unsuccessful for the TEAS. So I'm going to kind of address a bunch of you because I know a whole bunch of you have specific questions about, like, I was unsuccessful. What do I do next? So this is what I always recommend. Number one is you're really going to want to make sure that you are reviewing the printout that they gave you when you took your ATITs. That information is going to break down a lot of things that you were struggling with, and that is what you are going to study as you move forward before you take it the second time around. Now, science can be a beast if we're being completely transparent. It is not a easy subject to learn when it comes to ATITs, just because of the massive amount of information that you need to know. Here's what I always say with science. Number one, do active recall. I always recommend speaking it out loud. Teach it to a teddy bear, teach it to your parents, teach it to a best friend, talk to your dog. Just teach it to somebody out loud. Get like a whiteboard or even like a sheet of paper. If you can't afford a whiteboard, that's completely fine. But get something where you can write down as you're teaching and as you are saying, as you are talking about specific things. That process of you talking over and over and over again is going to start to build muscle memory. It's going to start to stick. It's going to become sticky inside your brain the more that you do that, and that's going to help you tremendously as you move forward. The other thing that I would also suggest too is that reevaluate how you've been studying. So if you're the type of person that's just been reading your notes nonstop and that didn't help you this time around, maybe you need to do something different. Implement the active recall, maybe make flashcards, whatever it looks like for you based on best practices and the way that you learn. That's what I would highly recommend as well. If it's because maybe you didn't have a whole lot of time to study up until this point, you weren't putting in the hours a day that it may take in order for you to retain the information when it comes to ATITs, then maybe you have to reevaluate priorities, right? Maybe, you're not able to go out on the weekend with your friends. Maybe you're going to have to stay home and you're going to have to study to get this test done, right? So there's things that you might have to reevaluate when it comes to the way that you studied this time around, and that's okay, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a small percentage of your time to ultimately reach a much bigger goal later on. That would be my recommendation for those of you who are having a little bit difficult time, and that's okay. If I want to become an anesthesia nurse after my bachelor's degree, how long do I need to study further? Great question. So this is my recommendation, is that if you're wanting to go back to be a CRNA after you completed your nursing program, I say, number one, you're going to have to give yourself a couple years, most likely in a high acuity setting like an ICU. Typically, what you will see is a lot of new graduates that ultimately know that they want to go back to school to be a CRNA. They look for those trauma ICUs, even like general ICUs, as long as it's a higher acuity, CV ICU, any kind of surgical ICU. Try to get your feet in the door there. The reason why is because a lot of CRNA schools like to see that you're working in high acuity settings and you've been working in it for an extended period of time. They want to know that you're going to have some kind of competency coming into the program that they're not going to be able to necessarily teach you. They're going to expect that you've already got some kind of baseline regarding that. So that would be my recommendation, is try to get into a higher acuity, preferably ICU. Surgical ICU would be even better in that particular situation, and give yourself a couple years. If you're 2 years in and you're still not feeling confident in the ICU, give yourself a little bit more time before you go back, because you have really got to feel good about what you are doing in that high acuity setting in order to be successful in the CRNA program.
Someone asked, is it a bigger or smaller student population-wise nursing school better in your opinion?
Like having a bigger or smaller class?
Yeah.
Great question. So the question was, is it better to have a bigger or smaller cohort in your nursing class? Which one's more beneficial? So what I would say is I personally don't have any experience with a smaller cohort, if we're just being completely transparent. My cohort was quite large. When we originally started, I think we had like 125 people, and we ended up losing, some of those people in the beginning in our first semester. Now, with having a larger cohort, there's some benefit there, because there's more people for you to get inside of your study groups, your friend groups, because at the end of the day, that's basically going to become your family for at least 2 years. You may never talk to these people again after you finish nursing school, but for at least 2 years, you're going to have to really be in tight with these individuals. So having that bigger program helps with that. You do have the option as well, as because more people are going to be going ahead of you with simulations. You're going to be able to get feedback a lot of times from those people. And you're going to have bigger cohort sizes when you're going to the hospital. So I do see a lot of benefits with having a bigger program, but I could also see benefits with having a smaller one too. Because if you think about it, it's a very intimate group. You got to really hope that you're going to get along with everybody, but it is a much more intimate group than you would have with a much bigger cohort. I don't think that you would probably see any beneficial type of learning, because I'm pretty sure that most nursing schools are almost exactly the same in the way that they teach. I will tell you that recently we've had a lot of discussion regarding a lot of the private nursing schools. So a lot of the smaller ones. So like the Herzings, the Kaisers, the Chamberlains, the Rasmussens, like the itty bitty nursing programs, not like the big university, big community college programs. There's been a lot of opinions about being in a smaller cohort and being in these more private schools. One is you have to pay more money, right, whenever you go to a private school. So that makes it a little less desirable for some individuals. Two, the school may not necessarily teach you the way that you learn. But I'm going to tell you, even with going to a community college or a university, you're probably going to be in the same boat with the way that a lot of these teachers teach, unfortunately. It just kind of comes with the territory, unfortunately, with nursing school. I wish that would change, and that there would be more interaction and more communication and breakdowns of concepts in nursing school, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. And unfortunately, it's going to take a lot to change that. So just be cognizant if you go into a smaller cohort, like a more private school, it may not necessarily be any better. You're just spending more money on it. I wonder if other countries pay as high as the United States. That's actually a really good question. So I actually have experience with this. So in a prior life, when I was working in a different position, I worked with a lot of international nurses. So nurses that already had experience, some nurses that just recently passed nursing school and were graduate nurses coming into the United States. I can tell you that based on the feedback that I had gotten from those individuals, is that a lot of them felt that the opportunities and the pay was significantly higher here than in a lot of the countries that they originated from. So for example, we had a lot of nurses that came from India. India has a very different way that they do healthcare as opposed to the United States. It's just the culture is very different in regards to like the nurse patient ratio and the things that they see. Based on a lot of the nurses I spoke to, they said that their patient loads were way higher in India than it was in the United States. So a lot of them will come to the United States to, yes, we're going to see ridiculous ratios here, but it's not to the same extent that you would see it anywhere else. And I can even tell you, like Mr. Cheung can speak from experience that the healthcare system in Hong Kong is also very different than it is here, right? A lot of patients are sharing like multiple rooms. You have multiple patients in the room, sometimes like 3, 4 patients to a room, sometimes more, depending on what's going on. It's a very community kind of nursing structure. So a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people want to have something different. They want to see maybe different pay. Especially when you go to like the Californias and places like that, they're going to pay you way higher. But of course, cost of living is very expensive. But yeah, it's very different. And a lot of nurses do seek to come here. Recently, there has been a bill that was passed, which was the H-1B visa. That is how a lot of international nurses come to the United States to practice. Typically in the past, that was a couple $1,000s from my understanding. It wasn't very expensive in order to get this visa to come to the United States. But now I'm hearing that it's potentially going to cost people $100,000. I should say the employer. It's going to cost the employer $100,000 for international nurses to come here. So we may not see as many international nurses in the future as we see currently just because of the changes with the H-1B visa. Sorry, I know I went off on a tangent, but yeah. I live in Sydney. It's quite expensive. I would say the pay is okay. The cost of living is extremely high as well. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. That's why a lot of people come to the United States because in a lot of areas, cost of living isn't as high. And then the pay is, depending on the area you're at, higher than the cost of living. So you can actually live comfortably as a registered nurse. So I can completely see that.
And in generally speaking, any country offer close to free healthcare. They don't pay doctor and nurses.
And that's also another good point. Mr. Chung brought up another good point is that a lot of countries that offer free healthcare, where you don't have to pay for healthcare, it's given to you as a privilege of being a citizen of the country. You don't necessarily get paid well as a nurse or as a provider in those areas, right? And it also takes you a really, really long time to get in to see a doctor. If you're sick or if you need surgery, there's a whole referral process and things like that. We do have a lot of the same things, but our healthcare system moves a lot faster than you typically would see in a lot of other areas. I had a nurse that was a travel nurse from Canada that came down to work in the United States just because of the fact that they just didn't get paid well. This is her opinion. They didn't get paid well in Canada, which is the reason why she flew here to take a international nursing position. And she had said that a lot of times, like if her children got sick, she would have to wait 4, 5, 6 months before she could even get them in to see their regular physician, which could be detrimental sometimes in certain situations. So if you're looking at getting a international nursing degree recognized in the United States, there is a specific website. And I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's the only one that the United States uses for the Board of Nursing, and they will evaluate the classes and the information that you took at your country of origin, and then they will translate it into how it compares to the United States healthcare system, and then that's how they'll transcribe it.
How would you describe accelerated program?
Like an accelerated BSN program?
Just she say accelerated.
How would I describe it?
Yeah.
So an accelerated program is like what it sounds, right? It's accelerated. It's going to be very fast. So typically with accelerated programs, you either had your LPN before, meaning that you already had previous healthcare experience, or you have a bachelor's in something else that will carry over in a accelerated BSN program. I will tell you, I'm not a huge fan of accelerated BSN programs, just simply because of the fact that there's a lot of information that you're learning over a period of 2 years, even less in accelerated programs. Sometimes it's 18 months, sometimes it's less than that, depending on what the program guideline is. And I almost feel like with accelerated programs, it's putting you at a disadvantage because you're not able to have the time, the freedom to learn the concepts. And when you get into healthcare, not that nursing school teaches you how to be a nurse by any means, but there are some concepts that are going to carry with you when you get into the nursing profession. And with having done something so quickly, you just never learned the concepts or the things that you needed to know before you moved on to other subjects. So I'm not a huge fan of accelerated programs. I understand why they exist. I just feel like there's better options or opportunities than going to an accelerated program.
And in New York, there's accelerated associate programs.
So NAS says in New York, there's accelerated associate programs. Again, I'm not 100% comfortable. Like, I get it. I completely understand. A lot of you are like, I just want to get this nursing degree so I can move on with my life and make my money and be the best that I can be. But the problem is that because you're just not being provided the opportunity to really sit down and learn the concepts, it becomes really difficult as you get into the nursing profession that you're going to have to learn it at that point, and that may place you behind others because, like I said, while nursing school is not going to teach you how to be a nurse, a lot of the concepts will stick with you as you move forward. So I'm just not a fan of accelerated programs, definitely not a fan of accelerated associate programs.
Noy asks how much is the pay rate start in Florida?
Good question. So prior to the pandemic, the pay rate was always like somewhere, I want to say like 25 ish around there. But now, since the pandemic has happened, I can tell you that a lot of nurses, when they came out of nursing school, required higher pay rates. So I have seen graduate nurses come in at 30 plus an hour. I think I had seen somebody at 33 was the highest I saw as a new graduate. I'm not talking about somebody who has experience. If you have experience, obviously you're going to get paid more than that. But yeah, a lot of new graduates came out of school insisting that they get paid very, very well. So it has pushed it up. I don't know if it's come back down since that happened, but I do know that right after the pandemic, that was pretty much what they were making.
Ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Someone is looking for a traditional BSN program. What are they need to look for to see if it's a good program or not?
So somebody's looking for a traditional BSN program and they're trying to figure out what school to go to and what they should be looking for in a school, right? So number one, they need to be nationally accredited. I'm going to say it over and over and over again. I get it that there's regional accreditations, there's state accreditations. You need to get yourself a nationally accredited thing, either through the CCNE or the ACEN. Those two are the accrediting bodies of the United States, specifically when it comes to nursing programs. Those are the two recognized ones. You will want to get into that. The reason why is because I recognize that a lot of you are probably going to go back to school and further your education at some point. Maybe you want to get your MSN in something. Maybe you want to be a nurse practitioner, a CRNA, a clinical nurse specialist. There's so many options that you could possibly do when it comes to healthcare, but it's going to be very difficult if you're trying to get into a nationally accredited school and you didn't get your degree from a nationally accredited undergrad. So that would be my first thing. The second thing is I would look at going to an information session. So a lot of times during the information sessions, they're going to give you kind of a breakdown of what the program looks like. They're going to tell you how many clinical hours you're going to have to do, what your semesters are going to look like, what your assignments are going to be, information about admission criteria and things like that. That should give you a really, really good idea of how you want to move forward when it comes to their particular programs. Because at the end of the day, if you go into an information session and your gut is like, "Ugh, this school feels icky," it's probably an icky school, for being completely transparent. I think I went to 4 different information sessions, and there was 2 of them that I was like, "Heck no. You can keep that program. I'm not going to that program." You're just going to know usually by the information session if it's going to make sense. Unfortunately, all nursing schools are kind of built the same thereafter. I mean, education pretty much looks the same. Clinical time pretty much looks the same. I mean, you're going to be going to either hospitals or nursing homes or mental health facilities. There's a whole bunch of different places you could go. You don't really have much of a choice in regards to that. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is like making sure it's nationally accredited, going to the information session, and then making decisions based on what you think would work best for you with with the schools that you have available to you.
Ready for next question?
Yep.
What do you think about MSN direct entry program?
Oh, like they don't have their associates or anything?
Yeah, go straight the associate, bachelor, and go straight to master.
So the question was what do I think about MSN direct entry program? So it's basically meaning like you don't have your associates already, you don't have your bachelor's, you're basically starting from the ground up and then ultimately going into your master's. The reason why, it depends on the program. Depends on the program. I have seen some programs where you do your associates, you do your bachelor's, and you do your master's, and a lot of people never go and work in between. I'm not a huge fan of that because I feel like if you're planning on furthering your career, whether it's nurse practitioner, CRNA, nursing education, clinical nurse specialist, nurse management, whatever it looks like, you should really have experience prior to going to your master's. I do recognize that a lot of people finish their bachelor's and go directly into their MSN to do nurse practitioner. I feel like you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, and this is just my personal opinion as having somebody who went to nurse practitioner school. I feel like you're putting yourself at a disadvantage by not having patient interaction or seeing healthcare as a whole for at least a minimum of at least a year. Minimally at least a year. I say give yourself more time than that, but at least minimally at least a year, because the problem is that you get into what your final goal is, and then you're kind of like in this situation where you've never really had patient interaction, you've never really worked in the healthcare environment, you're not really sure what the ebb and flow of healthcare is, and then you come in and you try to tell people what to do, but you're not really sure of what the processes look like, if that makes sense. I personally have worked with nurse practitioners that did this and were fantastic. And I've worked with some that weren't, that were just didn't understand healthcare in general. Like, I appreciate that they were really trying to get that nurse practitioner, but unless you know the ebb and flow of the hospital, it's going to be really, really hard for you to be respected by your colleagues or be part of the team, for lack of a better word. Because if a nurse tells you, "Oh, well, we actually do it like this," and then you're the kind of nurse practitioner that's like, well, we're going to do it like this because this is how I learned it in school, that puts you at a disadvantage because you never actually experienced it. So I don't have anything against direct MSN entry programs. I just feel like you really, really should experience it prior to going back and furthering your education. Like, really get your elbows deep in healthcare, really experience the struggles that we experience, the joys we experience, the sadness we experience. Like, really get into it before you decide to make that leap. That's what I would say. I see the NP mentors in here. Hey, girl, hey. But yeah, I completely agree. Get your experience first before you do that direct MSN. Please, I beg of you, please. It will make you a better practitioner. Trust me.
Someone asked, what are some jobs in the hospital that require an RN license, but they are more back-end and administrative?
What jobs require an RN license but are more back-end and administration?
Yeah, in the hospital setting.
On administration?
Administrative. Like, don't, they want to look at some jobs that require RN license, but don't need to do bedside. That's what pretty much comes down.
Got you. Sorry, you're gonna have to give me a second. I have to think about it. Nothing is coming to my brain, unfortunately. I'm gonna be honest, I can't think of anything. So the question is like, what positions are available in the hospital that I can get my RN license, but I never have to basically be at the bedside, have patient interaction? I can't think of anything as a new graduate where that would be a possibility. I think that you will have to at least put in your time at the bedside at some point. And even if you decided to be an assistant nurse manager, you wanted to do nursing education, um, you want to work with like infection prevention, like even informatics Miranda talked about, even like all of those positions that are going to want you to be a nurse at the bedside first and experience it, right? So like think about informatics. They're going to want you to be charting on that patient, taking care of the patient, like experiencing what's going on with the patient population so that when you get into informatics, you understand the struggles and the things we experience. If anybody has worked with Cerner, Epic, and then there's another one that HCA uses that I can't think off the top of my head. But if you worked with any of those systems, there's problems with all of them. Don't be wrong, Epic is fantastic. It's solved a lot of the issues, but there's still issues with it, right? So if you wanted to work in informatics, you really would need to see the other side. And have a good idea of like what we are experiencing in healthcare and what's the common struggles and the pain points. So you will have to do something, but it may just be minimally for a minimum amount of time.
What is the best advice on the first fundamental exam? They haven't learned much on critical thinking yet.
Gotcha. Like, are they in school yet though?
Yeah.
And then the first exam?
Mm-hmm.
Depends on what they're teaching on the first exam. It depends on what they're teaching on your first fundamentals exam. So this is what I would say. If you haven't built up critical thinking yet, now would be the time to do so, even in fundamentals. The reason why is because there is so much information that you are going to learn throughout your entire nursing program that's going to be imperative that you build critical thinking now while you're in the easier subjects. So critical thinking kind of looks like this. You're going to question like what is going on, right? So what's happening? What does the mechanism of action look like? What does the ultimate disease process look like, right? Why is it happening? So what systems are affected? What potential outcomes are going to be an issue with those systems being affected? Looking at like signs and symptoms of why this particular thing is happening, like really getting into the why. Nursing school is going to teach you not to ask why, but as a healthcare professional, you're not going to ask the patient why, you have to ask yourself why. There's a big difference between asking the patient, why are you doing this, than asking yourself, why is this happening? Do you know what I'm saying? It's very different, very different. So yes, you have to figure out the why. Why is this happening? And then the last piece when it comes to critical thinking is what is going to happen if I don't do anything about it, right? What is going to happen if I don't even touch this, right? That's going to be a big thing. That's going to be that big chunk of critical thinking that you're going to have to figure out as you're going through the nursing program. And when it comes to fundamentals specifically, as you are trying to study and you're trying to figure out how to study, my biggest recommendation to you is get that critical thinking down now and then start studying that stuff. There's a lot of really good books out there that will help you with like practice questions for fundamentals, med surg, all of those classes as you move forward throughout your career. I highly recommend getting an NCLEX study book now, whether you're PN or RN, and doing practice questions based on the area that you're in. That is going to help you tremendously when it comes to fundamentals. And as you move forward, that's how you're going to start building your critical thinking and piecing those things together. That would be my biggest recommendation. Hope got accepted into LPN to RN program. Huge congrats, Hope. I need to study for the TEAS. What do you suggest? You need to study everything. I hate to say it like that, but you're going to have to study everything. Take a practice test, see what areas you're struggling with. Look at the areas, like make a list of all the ones that you struggled with, and then spend 80% of your time studying the areas that were difficult and 20% of your time studying the stuff that wasn't. Because at the end of the day, that 80% is going to boost your score up. That 20% will get you there too, but not as much as that 80% will. What do you think about the West Coast? I have all my prereqs and I didn't score well on the TEAS. I have to wait 365 days again to retake my TEAS. Yeah, and it's frustrating. The West Coast will take my score and I will get a BSN. So here's the deal, y'all. New York, California really are the two biggest ones that I've heard of. They're extremely competitive. So if you have to think about it, there's not a whole lot of nationally accredited schools in certain areas. So they become extremely competitive with the people that they accept. So what happens is that, you'll get the minimum score on your TEAS that you need, but then they don't necessarily accept you because they're probably looking at a cohort that has higher numbers, right? They may be in the not 60s. They're most likely in the 90s, high 90s, low 90s. Like that's the people that they're looking for. It's a completely different beast trying to get your application in a competitive state versus a non-competitive state. Don't get me wrong. If you don't meet minimal requirements in a lot of other states, it's going to be still just as difficult for you to get into programs, but it's completely different in California and New York. It's like night and day difference. So unfortunately, if your TEAS score wasn't acceptable, and especially now that you have to wait a whole year before you can take it again, if you have the availability, maybe try to look outside of your state. Maybe look at states that maybe are a little less competitive if you're able to do so. I don't know what everybody's situations look like. Unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot you're going to be able to do in that situation because you're really at the discretion of the schools and what they accept. Any tips for upcoming interview with nurse recruiter? What questions should I expect to hear and ask? Great question. So we actually just talked about this, I believe last week or the week before. So when you're interviewing for your new grad position with a nurse recruiter, a lot of the recruiters themselves are going to ask you general questions. They're not trying to really get to know you that deep. They're going to say, oh, what school did you go to? Did you have good grades? Why do you want to work here? Is there something in particular that you're looking for? They're always going to ask you about salary because, HR is always worried about if we're going to be able to pay these people type of deal. They're going to ask certain questions like that. Really, they're just kind of vetting you to see if you meet the standards that the hospital holds in order to hire you as a nurse. That interview itself usually isn't anything big. The big interview is when you actually go meet with the nurse manager or the team of the unit. That's when you're going to have like the biggest types of questions. So a lot of those questions are going to be things like, what are your biggest strengths and weaknesses? Talk to me about an experience that you experienced in nursing school that maybe changed you. Tell me about a time you had difficult coworkers or you had a difficult patient and how you handled that. They're most likely also going to ask you a like a patient scenario type of question. They may say, oh, you have a patient that came up from the ER. They have a high fever. Their white blood cell count is high. Their blood pressure is low. Their respiratory rate is above 20. Like, what do you think's going on with this patient? Oh, they're in sepsis. They have a fever. That means they have an infection, and now it's causing organs to start to shut down, right? So they might ask you a question like that. They might ask you like why you want to work for the organization, why you would want to work for them. They're also going to ask you a very important question. They're going to ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Trust me, they're always going to ask you something like that. Now, y'all be too honest in interviews. Y'all are way too honest in interviews sometimes. Some of y'all will say, oh, well, I'm only going to put in about 2 years here and then I'm going to go be a CRNA. Don't tell them that. They're not going to hire you if you tell them that. They're going to hire somebody else that's going to say, oh, well, I hopefully will be here and hopefully in a leadership position or some kind of, part of the unit practice council, something like that. Like those are the questions that and the answers that they're looking for. Don't be honest. If your goal is to become a CRNA or a nurse practitioner, that's cool. But don't tell them that during an interview, right? Because that will hurt you in an interview. The other thing is that at the end of the interview, whenever you interview with a manager, they're going to say, do you have any questions for us? Think of a question. I don't care what the question looks like. Think of a question. Say, oh, well, what is your patient to nurse ratio? What is the culture like on your unit? Is it very team oriented? Is there a lot of autonomy? How are the providers you work with? Like, get to know. That's your opportunity to get to know the unit. 9 times out of 10, the nurse manager is going to lie to you about certain things because they just usually want to hire bodies. I hate to say it like that, but it is what it is. They might say, oh yeah, we only have a 3-to-1 ratio. And then you get there and you're like in a 5-to-1 ratio every single day. There's most likely they're going to lie to you about certain things. So that's why I always say it's okay to lie because the unit is also going to lie to you at the end of the day. So don't be too honest in your interview. Think of the things that they would probably want to hear. Do some research on the hospital and the unit. Try to find information about that specific hospital. If they're trying to reach magnet, if maybe their unit is like the best infection prevention unit, like try to find something that like makes you stick out, and always have questions and always have questions after your interview in case they ask.
How do you deal with imposter syndrome as a new nurse?
How do you deal with imposter syndrome as a new nurse? Feeling like you don't belong, like, why did I do this? I don't think that I fit in here. We've all been there. What I will tell you is that in the beginning, there's no advice. Just simply because of the fact that you're going to be struggling. It's okay. We've all been there. Every single nurse that came before you, whether they remember it or not, we've all experienced the struggle and we've all experienced the imposter syndrome. I think that imposter syndrome over time starts to kind of melt away as you get more experience and you get your feet more wet in the healthcare realm. I think it just unfortunately just takes time for you to get there. My biggest thing for you is that if you were concerned, if you're questioning something, talk to your preceptor. Like, I don't understand this. I don't know what's going on. Can you break this down for me? If you have a good preceptor, they will be there for you. And they will answer the most imperative questions in regards to the field. The more questions you ask, the more comfortable you will be as you move forward. I think the biggest point when imposter syndrome becomes so heavy on nursing is when we leave our preceptor and we're completely on our own and we're dealing with an entire patient assignment by ourselves. I think that is the period of time where you're like, oh crap. Now I'm by myself and I have to handle all these people by myself. I think that's what makes or break nurses. And that's what makes or breaks imposter syndrome because you realize that, oh, great. Now I'm the nurse. It's just me. Like, I've got to figure it out. And I think the more time you get in, the better off it'll be. Imposter syndrome is always going to suck. Try to find your people. Don't find, parents that are like, you only work 3 shifts a week. Why are you complaining? Those aren't your people. You need to find people that are going to understand you. They're going to understand what you're going through. That's going to help you tremendously as you move forward. And then just know that when you leave your shift, even if you have a bad shift, is that you did your best. As long as you did your best is good enough. And that's all that matters when it comes to healthcare. Once you have that attitude, imposter syndrome starts to melt away. Just takes time. What did you use to study for the CCRN? Great question. So I looked up on the website specifically the topics that they were using for the CCRN. And then I did self-study with a lot of textbooks, YouTube videos, things like that. Unfortunately, the CCRN, I know from what I understand, is changing soon. There's going to be a little bit of a difference in the amount of questions that they're asking in certain sections versus others. So that's going to be making adjustments soon from what I'm hearing regarding the CCRN. But ultimately, I think the plan is still the same with the stuff that you need to know. But I would just look up particularly the study plan that they tell you that you need to know and then use that. That would be my biggest recommendation. CCRN is not hard. It's just pain in the butt. That's what I would say. Am I echoing? It's weird. Is it possible to study for the TEAS in 1 week? I mean, is it possible? Yeah. I don't know how successful you'll be with only 1 week of study because I don't know like your background. Did you recently finish your sciences? Are you really, really good with a lot of the concepts that are going to be on the TEAS? Then you may be okay. It's just a refresher. But if it's been a while since you've taken classes, you've been out of school for a little bit, it's been a while since you've done your sciences, it may be a little bit more difficult. It's not doable. It's just definitely a little bit more of a struggle, I would say. I started CNA this summer at a hospital. If I extern while in the school, my pay lowers, no health benefits, $15 an hour. Hopefully, they will keep my pay rate the same. Interesting. I wouldn't be able to speak on that. I did PCT, but I'm honestly not 100% sure what the CNAs were making at the time that I externed in the hospital. Is it me? Am I echoing?
It's just loud. But
Oh.
Go straight from the phone.
Oh, because I speak really loud.
Yeah.
I'm a loud talker.
A couple people on TikTok ask, are you still practicing?
Am I still practicing? Yes. I get this question constantly. So yes, I am a registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse for 13 years. November will actually be 14 years. But yes, I have been a nurse. I'm still practicing actively. I do something a little bit different than what you would typically think. So I'm not at the bedside, but I'm still working in critical care education, meaning that a lot of programs, when you become a new graduate and you go through hospital orientation and your orientation on the unit, those are the programs that I build. So I build the pre-orientation type of orientation before you actually get to the unit. So all your ECG classes, how to be successful in the PCU ICU, learning different concepts, a lot of the echelon modules that you'll do depending on the hospital you work at. Everybody uses some different, but a lot of those modules, I also work with those. So I do a lot of things in the back end, as well as academically as well. So I do like nursing school, nursing, critical care concepts, building programs, things like that. But yes, I am still actively practicing. Have I ever done outpatient clinic and how was it? I've never done outpatient. I did apply one time to be a dialysis nurse many years ago. And I got bored. I went in for they basically call it like a shadow shift for like 4 hours just to see like what it looks like, how these individuals work, and what they do, and I was very, very bored, unfortunately. Not everybody's gonna feel that way, but for me, being that I was in the ER before that and I was doing ICU where everything's very, like, hectic and you're very on your feet all the time and you're constantly moving, it just wasn't for me, I'll put it that way, based on the little experience that I had. So I wouldn't be the best person to speak about outpatient clinic just because I never did it. I did do a clinic rotation in my program, in, my, college program. I did do a clinical rotation at a health department. I also wasn't a big fan of that either. It's just like it was a lot of paperwork.
If I become extreme
What is the hardest class in nursing school? Ooh, that's a good question. Personally, I felt like the hardest class was pediatrics. That's just my personal opinion. The reason I thought pediatrics was so difficult was because there's just a lot of age groups and things that happens in those age groups that are really, really difficult, and you have to know. So, like, 0 to 28 days, that's considered the newborn group, right? So you're having to figure out, like, what their milestones are, what they should be doing, and then you go from, like, 28 days up to 2 years, which is, like, you're getting into the toddler group, that's your infant group, and then, like, they should be meeting certain milestones. Their vital signs are very specific to their age groups. There's just a lot of information until you get up to adolescence. And then adolescence starts to follow more along the adult timeline. I think that was honestly probably the more difficult thing for me. That would be my most difficult class in nursing school. They're not tiny humans, they're little aliens.
What kind of books you recommend from nursing school as supplemental to prepare?
What kind of books would I recommend for nursing school as supplemental to prepare?
Yeah,
Like before going into nursing school or they're in nursing
yeah,
school?
in nursing school.
Oh, so if you're in nursing school and you're looking for like supplemental books, I would recommend looking for like an NCLEX book. Biggest thing. I personally use Saunders, is what I use. I don't necessarily think it's like the best thing that's out there, but look for something that's got a lot of nursing NCLEX type of practice questions. Typically, when I look for a book, I look for a book that is broken down based on all the subjects. So, fundamentals, pharmacology, medical surgical, maternal baby, mental health, all broken down by individual subjects so that I can get a lot of practice questions and a lot of practice in. It's very difficult to get through nursing school and to pass your NCLEX without being prepared from day one, doing NCLEX based types of questions and building your critical thinking and what that looks like. So I always recommend getting a really good NCLEX study guide to help you answer a lot of those types of things. Outside of that, I think a lot of like the books that you're going to have for school, if you're taking ATI, a lot of times they have ATI books that are ATI predictors to help you pass like each individual class, fundamentals, med surg, so on and so forth. I think those are decent. And then your textbook is really good. I don't think that there's anything outside of that that would be like hugely beneficial. Um, Unless you're looking for like a study guide that breaks down like different concepts, because I will be very transparent. A lot of your instructors are not going to break down concepts probably like you want them to. So then you can look at books like that where they'll break down concepts to easy to understand as opposed to academic textbooks, which are going to drive you insane because I don't need you to teach me about the fact that you have a doctorate in nursing practice and you wrote this book. Good for you. That doesn't help me learn the concepts, right? So that would probably be the two things that I would recommend. Finding like a, nursing school made easy kind of study guide and then a really good NCLEX question book.
How about something before nursing school then? Someone just started.
So how about something before nursing school? So before nursing school, you really need to dive deep into an A&P book. Get nitty gritty in A&P. Your teachers are not going to teach you A&P. If they do, fantastic. You're probably one of like the 5% of people that will have a really good instructor that will break down A&P concepts for you. The rest of us, the other 95%, didn't have that. So really get nitty gritty into the A&P concepts, because that's going to be major when it goes, especially when you're going into medical surgical. The other thing is really get intimate with dosage calculation now. I'm sure there's material out there that will help you in regards to that. It is very important that you pass dosage calculation with 100%, because at the end of the day, if you are struggling with math, dosage calculation is going to be really, really hard. Very, very hard. So get intimate with that. 100% on your dosage calculation exam. If you don't, the school has the option of holding you back this semester or just completely dropping you out of the nursing program. The other thing is to get really good with medical terminology, because if you can break down what a word is, if you've never heard of something, you're like, oh my gosh, what even is that? What is that concept? If you can break down the word, you can usually try to figure out like specifically what they're talking about. That would be my 3 things to do before going into school. Yeah, that's right. Most programs will kick you out if you don't get 100%. I have heard of some, and it's very, very few, where they'll allow you to get like 95% or above. But I can tell you that based on my school that I went to, if you didn't get 100%, you were out. And I failed my first dosage calculation exam. I wouldn't say failed it. I missed it by 1 question because I didn't read the question all the way through. But it was considered failing, and I had to take it again. And some of them will let you take it 2, maybe 3 times at most before they ultimately either let you go or they, hold you back a semester.
Do MSN program require 4-year experience, ICU experience?
Do MSN programs require 4 years of ICU experience? Not all of them. Not all of them. I always say give yourself at least a minimum of 2 years before you decide to go into a master's program. But not all of them require 4 years. There are some like really big like CRNA schools that will require you to have extensive ICU experience, and it could be 4 years. But I can tell you that like based on like my school, when I was going back to be a nurse practitioner, a family nurse practitioner, I had 2 years of ER experience, and they let me in with that. Oh, good. I got 1 question wrong in 5 semesters. It was a BID total med in 24 hours, and I put the single dose. Yeah. You have to be really careful with how questions are worded and specifically what they're looking for. I think that's the biggest thing with dosage calculation exams. And now I feel like they're even harder than when I went to school, is that they're making them very, very complicated. A lot of medication doses and things that you're going to have in healthcare aren't necessarily going to be that complicated, but they make it obscenely complicated sometimes. Yeah, Endo says it's hard to let you go when you fail dosage calculation. Yeah, because if you think about it, medication errors in the healthcare arena are huge. We lose more people to medication errors than to a lot of other things, right? Medication errors are the most preventable thing that we can do. We can prevent deaths from happening if we make sure that we're double, triple checking our medications and that they're correct. I can't tell you how many times, especially in the ICU settings, where I was given a medication from pharmacy and it had the wrong concentration. So a lot of times you'll have concentrations like 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, depending on like the kind of medication you're giving. Well, if you have parameters for a medication based on 1 in 10,000, and then they give you a medication in 1 in 100,000, then the patient's either getting too much or too little of the medication that they need. And a lot of times what happens is they're getting too much of a medication they need, and then they could ultimately be harmed. So that's why Dosage calculation is going to be very important. Even after you get out of nursing school, you're going to have to double and triple check the stuff that they give you to make sure that it's correct so that we're not unintentionally harming people due to medication errors specifically. One last one because I'm just scrolling up to look through. Do I need volunteer hours in healthcare? You don't necessarily need volunteer hours in healthcare, but if you are planning to go into a more competitive unit or specialty like NICU, labor and delivery, maybe even ICU, honestly, depending on the hospitals you're going to, it wouldn't hurt for you to get some volunteer hours. The reason why, and the number one question that I get all the time is, how do I get into these units? Well, if you volunteer in the unit and you put in your time in the unit and you get to know the management, you get to know the nurses, you get to know the providers that work there, a lot of times they'll say, oh, you're in nursing school, when do you finish? And they'll most likely offer you a job because they see how you work and they see how you volunteer. So that is when I would say volunteer hours would be important when it comes to healthcare and as you're going through your program, if you're trying to get in those more difficult areas.
Last question.
Uh-huh.
Best way to shadow or ask for shadowship?
Great question. Best way to shadow or ask for a shadow shift is go out to the hospitals or reach out to the hospitals and ask them about shadowing or volunteering. That's going to be the number two things. And usually what they're going to say is, where is it that you want to shadow? Where is it that you want to volunteer? You let them know, and then they'll let you know if the opportunities are available to you. A lot of times, like people, especially recently, they'll want to volunteer in the OR. They want to see what the OR looks like, especially for people who are wanting to become CRNAs. Because unless you've shadowed in a OR and then you want to go to CRNA school, it's going to be really difficult for you to know what that environment looks like. So I always recommend shadowing or volunteering in that situation if that was something that you wanted to do. That's just my personal opinion. I always recommend shadowing before you make that jump. But yeah, reach out to HR, reach out to whoever the coordinator is for volunteer shadowing types of things. I mean, if you just reach out to HR, they'll point you in the right direction of who you need to speak to. A lot of times some hospitals also list like volunteer/shadow type of information on their website and like who to reach out to or what the contact information is. You can also do it that way as well. Yeah, and using your nursing school email will definitely help for sure because they'll see that you're in school. All right, y'all. I think that is it. It's officially 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this live. Hopefully you learned some new information, a little less scary in regards to healthcare and the things to expect. We'll be back tomorrow for ATIT Science. Now, y'all, because I know that some of you are science people, you are not ready for tomorrow. I am so excited about tomorrow's lives. We are going to be doing something so cool. So my biggest recommendation to you is make sure you bring a pen and a piece of paper if you don't already do so, because we are going to be writing some things down. We are going to be taking notes. It's going to be really, really important. So hopefully you are as excited just as much as I am to get our fingers dirty as we go forward with ATIT's lives. But yes, we have science tomorrow. We're going to be doing English on Tuesday. And Mr. Cheung will be back on Thursday with some mix and match math. We have like a whole bunch of different subjects that we're going to be doing with math. So I hope that you're excited about that just as much as I am. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you all have a wonderful evening, and I'm going to catch you in the next live.